Hi to all. I'm really happy to be here today and to start this round with really interesting speakers. I already see here Olga, who is joining us today digitally, but as well our guest, Professor Dr. Jörg Faust. And before we start, I would like to encourage you in the audience to join our third seat here, because we would like you to be part of this discussion. Maybe you have interesting questions, maybe you have inputs, maybe you have lessons learned or success stories from the monitoring and evaluation sphere, so please be encouraged. Please join us on the stage. And I would like to introduce shortly myself. So I'm head of strategic partnerships at Fineo already for 4 years. And previously I have been leading Klitschko Foundation in Ukraine that was founded by Vitaly and Vladimir Klitschko for almost 10 years. So I think have now a good understanding of both countries and of civil societies. And I will be happy to introduce now Olha Krasovska, who is joining us from London, I think. So Olga is an independent monitoring and evaluation expert focused on design, implementation, and evaluation of national and international projects in decentralization, local self-government, and local democracy as well, regional economic policy, and SME development. She's currently head of the board at the Ukrainian Evaluation Association. And Olga, I'm happy to welcome you here with us.
Yeah, good afternoon, Paul. I'm currently in Newcastle, not in London, but yes, in the UK.
Oh. You're moving fast. Last week it was there. So I would like also to invite to join me on stage Professor Dr. Jörg Faust, who is the director of the German Institute for Development Evaluation and adjunct professor of political science at the University of Duisburg-Essen. Deval currently holds the chair of the OECD DAC Network and on Development Evaluation. And this year we all will see the launch of wide-ranging evaluation of reconstruction projects that are funded by BMZ. So I'm happy.
Hello, Olga.
So please take your mic.
Okay.
I will take mine. And as I promised, the third seat is for the public and audience. And I'm happy to have you both here, because I think today we have quite an interesting micro and macro level discussion on monitoring and evaluation. And to be honest, Olga, I know Ukrainian Evaluation Association since I think 2011, when I joined Klitschko Foundation and was working with several colleagues of yours. So it was a really great cooperation always, and I learned, I think, the most from that cooperation, what is monitoring and evaluation of charitable projects and how we can do it efficiently. And I would like to start with an opening question to you and ask you, Olga and Jörg, to give like short speaker input on this question, maybe for 3 minutes. And my question is, are we sure that we can say that there is a recovery during the war? Is it possible? Or recently I have read a great discussion on Facebook that maybe after Ukrainian recovery conference we should name it resilience, because recovery is not possible during the war. Maybe you can shape some thoughts around these ideas or these questions. So Olga, would you like to start first, or?
Yeah, probably. I still believe it's possible. I try to be optimistic. And it depends actually on the topic we discuss, and it depends on the, on the direction of our recovery. And of course, we can't discuss a full-scale recovery at the moment, but it's definitely areas where we can talk about recovery at some point. For example, like my favorite direction is like support of small and medium-sized enterprise businesses. It's about civil society. So there is no one answer to that question because it really depends on the area we are talking about. So we do have areas when we can talk about resilience, but we do have some of the areas when we can talk about recovery as well.
Thank you very much. Jörg, what is your point of view on that?
Well, thank you for that question. I guess I agree with Olga that we have to carefully look at what we are talking about. So which area, which sector, which kind of project, and then to decide whether it's a resilience against permanent aggression, whether it's recovery in a sense of building as it was, rebuilding something as it was before, or whether it's kind of building back better or transformative reconstruction, which means that there is something built up, but in a different way than before. And I think whether we talk about one of these three, very broadly speaking options, whether we talk about transformative reconstruction or recovery or resilience, very much depends on the sector and the geographic location.
Thank you. I don't think that we are talking today about that we need fundamentally integrate monitoring and evaluation processes. I think I see. So probably let's switch to that, because I was coming and joining the panel with a pure feeling that everyone is already aware that we need to do that, and it's part of our daily job if we are working in this sector. But I see that our speakers are shaking their heads, so maybe Jörg, is it still a fundamental task that we need to learn to do that and design this process before we start reconstruction or resilient projects?
No, I just was shaking my head and laughing a little bit, because we as evaluators and monitors, we love to jump on this topic. Yeah? So it's a kind of a pro domo recommendation. Oh, you have to do better monitoring. Oh, you have to do better evaluation, and everything will be bright in the future. This is partly true, but it's of course not the whole of the story. So that's why I was kind of, as evaluators, we like to endorse this topic, but I think if we want to kind of promote learning and implementation also, then it's not enough doing just this recommendation.
Olga, what is your idea on the question?
No, I actually agree, because unfortunately we do still need to convince our stakeholders that monitoring and evaluation should be embedded. And actually, going deeper to the topic, I might sound a little bit cynical. However, I believe that war can't be used as an excuse for not conducting monitoring and evaluation. And of course, in the situation of Ukraine, we need to distinguish evaluation of humanitarian and development projects. And if the first ones are currently being successfully conducted in Ukraine due to the significant number of implemented humanitarian projects, that in its turn, evaluation of development project, it's more challenging, it's obvious, because first of all, the implementation of development projects during the wartime is more challenging per se. So, however, I still believe, and I support the previous speaker, that difficult does not mean impossible. Yes, we do want to have monitoring and evaluation everywhere, but we do understand as well that it's very, very challenging. And we do need to deliver evaluations even under these challenging realities we live in. So I can provide my view how it's possible to conduct monitoring and evaluation in these realities, if I may already.
Of course, please.
Yeah, so in reality, you always need to plan evaluation before the intervention, and the war doesn't change that. And of course, this is true for new projects and programs, for new interventions. But interventions and being in delivery when the full-scale war started, in 99% of cases had to change their activities and thus to reconsider the whole evaluation approaches, evaluation methodology. So it was quite a task for the evaluation teams as well. But in the reality of Ukraine, starting to plan evaluation from the very beginning is not enough, because pure coordination and overlapping among different interventions in terms of activities, target groups, or geographical coverage was challenging even before the full-scale war, and now it's became even more critical because it affects not only delivery but also evaluation, as we can't bother the same group of beneficiaries or stakeholders several times, and because their time and availability are very limited, and it's very difficult, like physically difficult to reach them. So to ensure proper evaluation, we need not to be one, but actually 2 steps ahead, and to ensure proper coordination of interventions themselves. And unfortunately, the Ukrainian government do not do really good job in that, and it's very often this coordination lays in the donor responsibility, and we do need to be stronger there. And of course, we need to coordinate evaluations as well, because we need to agree on time and in place, and if possible, to conduct joint evaluations. I had this experience when we had joint evaluation with different donors, and it worked really well. And it was before the war, but it's still possible and even more relevant now. And I mentioned already timing. Timing is really important, very, very crucial at the moment, because at the moment, the demand of Ukrainian evaluators is much higher than the number of available experts. So to get a qualified expert on board, you need to start searching for expert really in advance. And you do need this expert with a good understanding of the context, because as you, Alina, mentioned from the very beginning, you do have understanding of both countries, that it's important, because you can ensure proper evaluation only in case you have this proper understanding of the context. Also, and it's probably very popular thing, it's the balance between accountability and bureaucracy. I believe the paper invoices or signed list of attendance are not always necessary. I was personally in the situation when I was asked to send a paper invoice when I was literally 5 kilometers from the war zone, and it couldn't work. It was like 2 weeks from the start of the invasion. So I believe the donors should be more accurate in terms of their demands for the documents they ask from evaluators. Another challenge is just evaluation methods per se, because in this situation, triangulation could be difficult, while using experimental methods like counterfactuals could be even impossible. So you need to be really flexible and adjust your evaluation methodology even if the process has started already. So don't be afraid to reconsider your evaluation method. So it's absolutely necessary in this situation. And also, evaluation is a lot about people, and you need to remember that beneficiaries who are currently in Ukraine most likely will be traumatized, like physically and mentally. And the good thing when your evaluation team ideally has professionals with respective skills, ideally psychologists, but at least trained people. And from my personal experience as an evaluator, offline always works better. Of course, if the safety situation allows, we can't just put our evaluators or our beneficiaries in danger. But we just finished joint ILO Danida evaluation with offline mission in Ukraine, and I wasn't sure that we won't be able to have such a good feedback online. And Ukrainian beneficiaries really appreciated to have evaluation team offline talking to them, because it's fair enough to be there if you are doing evaluation. And probably the final remark, sorry for taking probably too long, that this is the final remark that is true for all contexts, that we need to make our evaluation work. We need to carefully consider result when designing future and when interventions, but we always need to remember that we need to be quick, very quick, as situation changes not every minute, but every second in Ukraine, and that is probably the most important message from me today.
Dear Olga, thank you for your great input. You provided so many insights, so I think for those who are not currently in Ukraine and maybe also not on the ground, because I think to do an on-the-ground monitoring and evaluation in current situation is like being one of the most courageous persons probably on the project, if the project managers are not on the ground, for example. I still encourage our audience to think to join us here, and we'll slightly move asking questions. Also, Jörg. Jörg, we have heard Olga saying really great feedback and insights, and you have been monitoring probably a lot of international projects and programs. What kind of lessons learned can we use from former war and conflicts? Maybe there's something similar that Olga has been already mentioning in consideration of different stages where our country or our state and other countries are currently, and as well of civil society engagement, good governance, corruption problems. So there is a big variety of facets that can be discussed. Maybe you have some lessons learned that we can use also in Ukraine to make this process more efficient and very smooth, I hope, if we can do that.
Yeah, thank you. Or shortly, or half a year after the Russian aggression against the Ukraine, at the OECD Development Committee, the evaluation group started obviously to discuss, okay, there will be a reconstruction support, and then how in 2 or 3 years we will be asked to evaluate. And then obviously the discussion started, okay, what can we learn from former experiences? And the initial obviously thing was, oh, we had now this Afghanistan evaluation and we had this Iraq evaluation. And indeed, my institute at German Institute for Development Evaluation, we did this strategic evaluation on civic engagement in Afghanistan or in Iraq. So what can we learn about it? And my first point would be here to stress where there are no similarities or little similarities. And I think one crucial difference from those cases with the Ukraine is that it is not about an internal civil war. It's about an external aggression. It's not about state building of an incoherent society, but it's rather about reconstruction or building back better after an external or during an external aggression. And perhaps most importantly, it's not about building a democracy or democratic and meritocratic state structures after autocracy. It's about strengthening an already existing democracy. So these are kind of very strong differences, and which obviously give reason to be a little bit more optimistic when we talk about the reconstruction process or the recovery process. At the same time, there are similarities, and these are particularly lessons that should have been learned by supporters, by the donor communities in the past, but I think it's very difficult that these lessons are learned. And the first one is the massive inflow of financial resources into a conflict-driven context creates serious challenges for governance and corruption. This is not a Ukrainian phenomenon, this is not an Afghan phenomenon, this is all over the world. Whether it's happening here in Germany after floods, where a lot of money goes into reconstruction, whether it happens in the Ukraine or anywhere else. If you have a massive inflow of resources in the context of crisis, you will get a corruption and misuse issue. So how do you control or diminish at least this challenge is crucial, particularly if state structures are not in a stage of high resilience, yeah? And particularly if you, before the crisis, had already serious governance or corruption problems. So I think this is something really challenging for the reconstruction process, and external supporters should take a careful look at it, because it also tends to diminish the legitimacy within donor countries for continuously being engaged in the Ukraine and support the country. So what are the potential negative externalities on governance by reconstruction support? The second thing is coherence. Whether it has been in Haiti, the Ukraine, in South Eastern Europe, there is always a tendency for supporting countries to be fragmented. It's very difficult to create coherency in one's external approach. And what I've been listening at the OECD in our last meeting, that every evaluation unit is kind of concerned about this coherence problem also in the Ukrainian reconstruction problem. And the coherence problem is not only a challenge for giving right incentives for kind of putting the reconstruction process in an ordered form. The coherence of fragmentation problem is also a huge burden on the Ukrainian state, because it increases immensely the transaction costs for the Ukrainian state to kind of coordinate and to be kind of in contact with many, let's say, disorganized donor countries. My hope is that the particularly instance of the potential of becoming an EU member, so the EU accession process will create a certain amount of coherence. So second point, coherence. And the third one is locked in political interests. The Russian war against the Ukraine has been the biggest kind of security threat also to Europe since decades. And it is a very strong internal political debate on how to position itself. Once politicians have kind of confirmed and internally within their parties, within the political competition, have put their interests on the table and kind of formulated their interests, it's very hard for them to move their positions. And they are kind of locked in a personal political commitment. And then in such situations, it's very kind of difficult to make political leaderships learn from evidence. To give you an example from Afghanistan, the evidence that the democratic state building was failing was there. It was around. It was not a problem of the lack of evidence. It was a problem of absorption of this evidence by political leaders. And this problem is bigger the more political a certain crisis becomes. And we definitely, in the Ukraine case, have a case of highest political importance. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to welcome our first guest from the audience. I think it's almost turned on. So if you can shortly present yourself so we know where you're from and what are you doing and your question.
Marie-Karin von Gumpenberg. I'm here for Partnership for Transparency Europe. We support civil society in fighting corruption. And my second head-on is I'm a freelance evaluator. So we have talked right now about the meta levels of evaluation. Maybe Olha, can you tell us what are the biggest mistakes currently evaluation units are doing when contracting evaluation? So what is really going wrong, where we could learn from? So really in practical terms, choosing the evaluators, choosing approaches, what is going wrong currently so we can do better? That's my question.
Thank you very much.
Now I'm just thinking why it's going wrong. It just can always be better, but it doesn't mean it's going wrong now. So actually, yeah, we do have, as I mentioned, we do have limited number of experts because some of them just left the country and some of them are pretty busy at the moment. So first of all, there are several databases of the experts you can use in terms of finding proper experts. You can use Ukrainian Evaluation Association, and because we are not actually classical NGO, we do not conduct evaluation ourselves. We are rather an expert club. We do have Facebook groups, so you can advertise always your way of finding an expert there. What I observe very practically, that the cost of evaluators rise significantly because of the limited supply. And what is always the case, when you are contracted as a national expert, your daily rate is always tend to be lower than international. And it's very often the case that national experts in Ukraine, they already have international experience and they just don't want to be contracted only as national expert. And international companies like Council of Europe, I don't know, GIZ, European Commission, USAID, seeing the Ukrainian passport, they like immediately offered experts like twice or 3 times lower daily rate, and it won't work in the nearest future. So you need to balance daily rate. It's very practical because this is what I used to experience. In terms of methods, you know, you need just to consider limitations we have on the ground in terms of how many beneficiaries we can reach during the evaluation mission. Where can we go, like physically, because we can't go to every places we would like to go because of the safety reason. Again, in terms of offline-online thing, it's, as I mentioned, it's always better to have an offline mission, but we need to ensure safety reason. Several times we had to cancel our missions because, yes, we can't find the place in Ukraine in the shelter, but we can't guarantee that our stakeholders who were coming to meet us will be safe on their way, and we didn't want to have that responsibility. So don't try to cover, I don't know, like 50, 60 evaluation questions. We had this experience as well. It's very difficult in this context. It's difficult in any context because you need to have a limited number of evaluation questions, but also just be realistic in what we can offer as evaluators in our context. That's probably from the top of my head.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you for the question. And I think we have still here also an amendment from Jörg's side.
I couldn't agree more with Olga on what she's been saying. I think there is, in Germany, BMZ has published very good evaluation guidelines. So it's not my job as an evaluator to highlight the ministry, but in this case I make an exception. Because
sharing is caring, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe somebody doesn't
Because
know.
they are very good guidelines, and one kind of particular important principle of evaluation laid out there is, or two, is one, do no harm. So evaluation 2 has to kind of be, has to obey to the do no harm principle. And I think Olga made some examples very clear that in a situation like in the Ukraine, evaluation can do harm. So you have to be very careful about this. And the second one, I think that's equally important, is partnership. So how do we strengthen the Ukrainian capacities to evaluate the reconstruction processes by good principles of evaluation themselves? And how do we kind of promote that evaluations financed by supporters also include the Ukrainian perspective? And I think this kind of partnership principle has to be taken very seriously in the ongoing or in the forthcoming years, because in the past we have seen many evaluations which just took the perspective of the donor kind of organization. And so do no harm and partnership are crucial principles for evaluation, particularly in the context of the Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have another question here, another guest. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Lea Moser from Task Force Ukraine from BMZ. I just wanted to take the opportunity because, I mean, the Platform for Reconstruction is such a special forum because we really have stakeholders from different groups. We have companies here, we have stakeholders from municipalities, from civil society. So not all of them are actually, you know, working in projects and programs, but also through investments, through different means of financing. We have the twinning partnerships between different cities. So I'm just wondering, how can we really make sure that we can also learn from each other, that we can also, you know, the challenges that you mentioned, like absorption capacity, corruption, and so on. How can we tackle these? And then on the other hand, how can we, the, you know, benefits of working together through do no harm, through partnerships, how can this also be scaled up through these multi-stakeholder exchanges that we are having?
Olga, do you want to start with an answer, or Jörg?
Yeah, I will be very brief here. I believe the platform we are here, it's a very good place to ensure this learning process. Unfortunately, very often evaluations are closed, so we have closed reports, like confidential reports, so that can't be shared. But I'm sure that it's very easy to have lessons learned that could be shared with the broader public. And I do see our platform we are talking today as this very nice place to learn from each other and to learn from good evaluations or like promising evaluations or even from bad evaluation. It's actually easier to learn from bad evaluations what to do next. So, good way to go.
No, I agree. I would say that this platform has to be continuously used for an exchange on evaluations and monitoring. And I think the importance is that this platform in the future is able to kind of deal with a huge variety and diversity of evaluations. Yeah, we at DEVAL, we do these major strategic, long-term evaluation things which take 2 years. But Olga has said, okay, there is a need for quick evaluations also. There's a need for project evaluations. So I think in the future it will be important that we have such a network platform where there is exchange between those different actors, which all have a certain need of knowing about what happened with their kind of investments, but they are very different. So this platform is a good idea. And I would be very interested to learn more about from Olga, because we at DEVAL, we also have an evaluation capacity development function. I would learn more from you about what are the two critical constraints for evaluation capacity development in the Ukraine now? Because it's obvious that we need it, but...
Yeah, because even as Olga already mentioned before, and there is another guest joining us, please, there is already not enough evaluators in Ukraine even before the war in 2014. Yeah, I'm counting from that period of time. And that's also a question how we here, meeting each other, can think how we can educate more Ukrainians, more project managers maybe, to have kind of a joint, I don't know, skills or possibilities for them to do this kind of a work if it's not possible currently to find an evaluator. So maybe before we switch to the last question from the audience, maybe just a short answer from you, Olga, and maybe then Jörg as well from your side. What can Ukraine do to educate more evaluators, or what we as international partners sitting here currently can do for you?
Yeah, actually, I had this dream since I was the head of Ukrainian Evaluation Association. So we dreamt about having self-regulation organization to introduce a standard and not license for being evaluator, but so to say a quality mark. And unfortunately, the war interrupted our plans and we didn't manage to really introduce that because it's really a long way to go. But if international community is ready to help us with that, we are more than happy to come back to this idea. Because yes, we can educate more people, and we are, as an association, we do provide training for civil society organization to projects. We do try to educate, but as I mentioned, we are not in a classical organization, we are as a club. But just to introduce this certification of evaluators, I believe it can help, but it's a long-term plan. So at the moment we do need more evaluation, like a quick win, and maybe partnering more advanced evaluators with a younger one, emerging evaluators can help, like in Ukraine. So that is a short answer from my side.
Do you have any kind of amendment, or go to our guest at the stage here?
Thank you. My name is András Secker. I work for Habitat for Humanity. We work to support low-income and marginalized people to realize their right to adequate housing in 70 countries of the world, Ukraine being one of them. In your introductory remarks, Professor Faust, you talked about the burden of just the influx of funds on the government. I would like to link to that. Because reconstruction in all cases doesn't happen just sort of only in a mid-crisis or post-crisis society. There was a context there before with functional or dysfunctional policies. One of the things we worry about is a lot of donor funding flowing into the substance of housing, into the physical infrastructure, while not addressing pre-existing dysfunctional policies that bar access to housing to low-income people, create dysfunctionalities of multi-apartment buildings, so on and so forth. So where do you see the responsibility of donors in shaping the rules of funding? And where do you see the responsibility of evaluators to make sure the relevance and unintended consequences sections highlight problems? And how can you even find those problems?
Last question.
I still wanted to do a final networking round, so we should to be on time.
This is, of course, a $1 million question, yeah, because you were asking about the role of kind of the evaluators. Yeah, they have to obviously identify the amount or the substance of the existing problem you mentioned. Yeah, like is emergency assistance in a way deepening or promoting already existing dysfunctional structures, yeah? And of course this is a challenge, yeah? And it is very hard, yeah, in a situation where you want to do kind of a quick, where you want to achieve quick results, yeah, to change the structural underlying. So you will have the tension always. And for instance, in Germany, we are debating a reconstruction in Gaza. You have an underlying very similar issue. And I think you have a serious problem there in countries where at least part of the governance has been dysfunctional, but you won't kind of eliminate this problem. I think this is one of the core dilemmata, if you want to say so, in urgent recovery, processes, and to some extent you will have to accept it. This might not be a very satisfying answer, but as I said in the beginning, I mean, it doesn't matter of which region and country or case you talk of. It may be in flood-affected regions of Bavaria, or it may be in Afghanistan. Obviously, different degrees, yeah, of the pre-existing problematic structures, but you will kind of face this dilemmata.
Thank you. Thank you for joining the round. I think we still